Hello, boys and girls. Um, Snowy day today. Today is called Good Friday because it's the Friday before Easter, but it doesn't seem like a Good Friday with all that snow and wind and cold out there today. We actually turned our fireplace on this morning and had a fire while we were eating breakfast. Hopefully you've been doing your Zern, your Freckle, and your Raz Kids, as those are some things that need to start being done as your paper packets are being finished. Okay, Carter and Rylan and Wyatt have been on, so I've been seeing some progress from them, which is great. Okay, so we need to all start doing those to keep up in school mode. Remember, it's still school time, okay? So we need to remember to keep working hard, all right? Only about an hour a day. I mean, an hour out of your day is, what is expected, and I think it's certainly doable for you, okay? And of course, everything that you do outside of the websites that I give you and the packet that you have can also be learning. Like if you do some cooking, that's learning. If you do some art, that's learning. If you do some like workout things or gym things, that's learning. So you're kind of learning in all different ways besides the websites and the packets. Right? You want to keep up your reading level. You don't want to come back to school and have gone down a reading level, okay? All right, that's important. Okay, so on to Edward Tulane. Last we read, Bryce had moved forward in trying to get Edward kind of back to life. Remember, Edward had been thrown and cracked his head, and we read a whole chapter about what Edward was thinking as his world went black. And he thought a lot about all the people he had met that showed him love and taught him how to love, with one of them missing, Sarah Ruth, but she had become one of his constellations that he loved to look at, those stars that are so important to him. So, chapter 24, we're going to go back to the doll store. And if you remember, Lucius was what I might call the doll doctor. And he was the one who has brought Edward out of his dark world, repaired his face, made him fancy again, and but he and Bryce had made a deal that if Bryce left him there to be fixed, then Lucius then owned Edward, and Bryce could not have him back. So that was kind of sad to learn. So chapter 24, and we start with a picture. There's a picture of Bryce coming in the door. Now, if you look closely in the background, there's some pictures of some dolls. So we have to assume that Bryce is coming in to Lucius's store where he mends or fixes and sells the dolls. We're getting close. We only have 4 chapters left, so today I'm going to read 24 and 25, and then we'll only have 2 left. Okay. And so Edward Tulane was mended, put together again, cleaned and polished, dressed in an elegant suit, and placed on a high shelf for display. From this shelf, Edward could see the whole shop, Lucius Clark's workbench, and the windows to the outside world, and the door that the customers used to enter and leave. From this shelf, Edward saw Bryce open the door one day and stand in the threshold, the silver harmonica in his left hand, flashing brilliantly in the sunlight flooding in through the windows. "Young sir," said Lucius, "I am afraid that we made a deal." "Can't I see him?" asked Bryce. He wiped his hand across his nose, and the gesture filled Edward with a terrible feeling of love and loss. "I just want to look at him." Lucius Clark sighed. "You may look," he said. "You may look, and then you must go and not come back. I cannot have you in my shop every day, mooning over what you have lost." "Yes, sir," said Bryce. Lucius sighed again. He got up from his workbench and went to Edward's shelf and picked him up and held him so that Bryce could see him. "Hey, Jangles," said Bryce. "You look good. The last time I saw you, you looked terrible. Your head was busting in and—" "He is put together," said Lucius, "as I promised you he would be." Bryce nodded. He wiped his hand across his nose. And here's a colored picture. And you can see a better picture of Lucius's shop. And there's Edward all put together in his fancy clothes. And you see Lucius, a very serious, stern man. "Can I hold him?" he asked. "No," said Lucius. Bryce nodded again. "Tell him goodbye," said Lucius. "He is repaired. He has been saved. Now you must tell him goodbye." "Goodbye," said Bryce. "Don't go," thought Edward. "I won't be able to bear it if you go." "And now you must leave," said Lucius Clark. "Yes, sir," said Bryce. But he stood without moving, looking at Edward. "Go," said Lucius Clark. "Go." "Please," thought Edward, "don't." Bryce turned. He walked through the door of the doll mender's shop. The door was closed. The bell tinkled, and Edward was alone. Think about the other times that Edward has been alone. See if you can come up with 2 other times Edward was alone. Okay, I think I have 2. I have, well, there's more than 2, but I come up with the bottom of the ocean, the garbage heap, and then other ones would be when he was a scarecrow before Bryce saved him. And I think that's it. Yeah, because after Bryce saved him, he's been with him or Lucius the whole time. Okay, chapter 25, and I'm sure the boys will love this picture. There's all the fancy dolls in Lucius's shop. Technically, of course, he was not alone. Lucius Clark's shop was filled with dolls. Lady dolls and baby dolls, dolls with eyes that opened and closed, and dolls with painted-on eyes. Dolls dressed as queens and dolls wearing sailor suits. Edward had never cared for dolls. He found them annoying and self-centered, twittery and vain. This opinion was immediately reinforced by his first shelf mate, a china doll with green glass eyes and red lips and dark brown hair. She was wearing a green satin dress that fell to her knees. "What are you?" she said in a high-pitched voice when Edward was placed on the shelf next to her. I'm a rabbit, said Edward. The doll let out a small squeak. You're in the wrong place, she said. This is a shop for dolls, not rabbits. Edward said nothing. Shoo, said the doll. I would love to shoo, said Edward, but it is obvious that I cannot. After a long silence, the doll said, I hope you don't think that anyone is going to buy you. Again, Edward said nothing. The people who come in here want dolls, not rabbits. They want baby dolls or elegant dolls such as myself. Dolls with pretty dresses. Dolls with eyes that open and close. I have no interest in being purchased, said Edward. The doll gasped. You don't want somebody to buy you? She said. You don't want to be owned by a little girl who loves you? Sarah Ruth, Abilene. Their names went through Edward's head like the notes of a sad, sweet song. I've already been loved, said Edward. I've been loved by a girl named Abilene. I've been loved by a fisherman and his wife and a hobo and his dog. I've been loved by a boy who played the harmonica and by a girl who died. Don't talk to me about love, he said. I have known love. Ah, I just love that paragraph. That to me is probably the most important paragraph in the book, considering I've read the whole book already. But that paragraph proves how much Edward has learned through the book. Our character, Edward, has changed. And that is one of the most important things that an author will do. An author will come up with a character in their head. And they will say, I want my character to start like this, but end up like this. And that paragraph proves that the author did that. When Edward names off all the people who have loved him and taught him what love is, I just love that paragraph. I'm going to read it again because I think it's so important. I have already been loved, said Edward. I have been loved by a girl named Abilene. I have been loved by a fisherman and his wife, and a hobo and his dog. I have been loved by a boy who played the harmonica, and by a girl who died. Don't talk to me about love, he said. I have known love. The impassioned speech quieted Edward's shelf mate for a considerable amount of time. Well, she said at last, still, my point is that no one is going to buy you. They did not speak to each other again. The doll was sold 2 weeks later to a grandmother who was purchasing her for a grandchild. Yes, she said to Lucius Clark, that one right there, the one with the green dress. She is quite lovely. Yes, said Lucius, she is, isn't she? And he plucked the doll from the shelf. Goodbye and good riddance, thought Edward. The spot next to the rabbit stayed vacant for some time. Day after day, the door to the shop opened and closed, letting in early morning sun or late afternoon light, lifting the hearts of the dolls inside, all of them thinking, when the door swung wide, that this time, the person entering the shop would be the one who wanted them. Edward was the lone contrarian. That's a hard word, okay? It comes from the word contrary, okay? So to be contrary means that you do and say opposite of what people expect from you, okay? So, for example, an easy example might be if we were in school and I said, oh boy, this work, I can't read this work, it's too sloppy, you need to do it again. Make it neater this time, please. And if you were a contrary child, you would sit down and do it, but it would be the same sloppy mess. You would be contrary. You're just doing the opposite on purpose, okay? So, Edward is a contrarian, meaning he is thinking the opposite. So, all of the dolls want to be adopted. They want to be bought. They want to go home with a child. Edward is the opposite. He doesn't want to be bought. He doesn't want to go home with anybody. He's already loved. So he doesn't need to be loved anymore. He holds the love of those other people. He prided himself on not hoping, on not allowing his heart to lift inside of him. He prided himself on keeping his heart silent, immobile, closed tight. I'm done with hope, thought Edward Tulane. And then, one day at dusk, right before he closed the shop, Lucius Clark placed another doll on the shelf next to Edward. Okay, so now an author is most likely to do opposites, okay? So through the whole book, there's been opposites. Abilene versus Pellegrina. Abilene versus the boys on the ship. Nellie versus her daughter Lolly. The hobo, Bull and Lucy versus the man on the train. Bryce versus the old woman who made Edward a scarecrow. Bryce and Sarah Ruth versus their father. And now, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot a couple. Neil, the owner of the diner, versus Bryce. Bryce versus Lucius Clark, who's not very nice and won't let Bryce have Edward back. So we had the first doll, the one in the green dress, who was very snotty, arrogant, not nice. And now we will probably have this second doll be opposite. All right, so think about what would be opposite of the doll in the green dress. And we're going to read about that opposite next time in chapter 26. Okay, but before I will show you a picture. So that is the new doll that it will come to sit next to Edward. And, you know, you can kind of tell from her, she's got a sweet little baby face. She's clearly a baby doll, not like an older doll. So we have to think how she's going to be opposite. All right? Boy, we have learned a lot about authors and how they write fiction stories. And that's a part of learning also. So I'm very proud of you if you've kept watching the videos and gotten through this book. It's a really powerful book, I think. So next time you see me, we will read the last 2 chapters, and then our book will come to an end, and it makes me sad. I hate when good books come to an end. But I hope that you have a wonderful Easter on Sunday. Might not be your normal Easter, but I hope that you do have a good one. And there will be some special videos next week, so you want to look out for those. And I'll be telling your parents where to watch them and how to find them. So I miss you, and I hope you have a good Easter, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.